Okay, I think that is probably enough time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, hello and welcome to Adobe Premiere Pro Tips and Tricks. My name is Nikki and I'm an instructor at the Harrington Library. And today I will be assisted by my chat facilitator and wonderful tech support, Sabrina. Can you please say hi, Sabrina?
Hello, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So some ground rules before we get started. Your mics have been muted on purpose. If you have a program-related question that you would like to ask, please do so in the chat or Q&A, which can be accessed at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Your text will only be seen by library staff, not all attendees. Any inappropriate behavior will result in your removal from this virtual program. We will try to answer the questions as we go along, but there will be time for a Q&A after the lesson is over. A recording of this class will also be sent out and posted to the library's YouTube channel at a later date. Okay, there we go. All right, so today we will be covering some tips and tricks for editing in Premiere Pro. We're going to cover some ways that you can optimize your workflow, creating title screens and rolling credits, and also some tools that are available within Premiere to help you degrain or denoise your video footage. So this class is not intended to be an intro to Premiere, so I'm not going to be going into the details of importing or exporting clips or detailed explanations of terminology within Premiere, but I am going to make sure that I narrate as I navigate and then still walk us through all the steps that are going to be needed for today's tips and tricks. This class is still intended to be at a beginner level, so you should be able to follow along even with limited prior experience in Premiere Pro. On that note, if you are new to Premiere, we do have a recording up on the Plano Public Library YouTube page of a past session of the Intro to Video Editing with Premiere Pro class, which covers the process of importing, exporting, and a detailed explanation of some basic editing tools. This can be found along with other Adobe Suite classes on the technology training playlist, which we will drop a link to in the chat for y'all. And if you want to follow along with today's class or when the recording is posted, we do actually have 2 links to exercise files that you can follow. You'll have to follow each of them if you want to get all of the files for today's class. I'm actually just utilizing video footage that I've used in past classes. So I apologize about the 2 links, but if you'll follow both of those, download all of the files in there, and you should have everything you need to follow along today. You can actually get a free 7-day trial of Premiere through the Adobe website, or currently all of the open Plano Public Library locations are offering access to the Adobe Creative Cloud. So you can access Premiere Pro for free anytime at the library with your library card on our Adobe stations. We do also have digital creation spaces at both Parr and Haggard libraries. And these spaces have the entire Adobe Creative Cloud on their computers, as well as access to cameras and audio equipment. So we actually have quite a bit to cover today. So we're going to go ahead and get started and hop right into Premiere. So I'm just going to go ahead and navigate down here and click on Premiere to open it on up. And might take us just a second here. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and start by creating a new project. And Premiere did have a pretty big update within the past, I would say maybe 5 to 6 months. So if you have used Premiere before and you haven't been in here in a while, this page, when I click new project, does look a little different. But it functions pretty similarly to the way it was before. So we're going to go ahead and name our project up here. So I'm just going to go ahead and name it Tips and Tricks. And then project location, I'm going to go ahead and choose where I would like to have this file saved, my project file. So I'm going to click on choose location. And yes, we're almost in the file I want to be in. So I have a folder on my desktop named class, and then tips and tricks and project. So this is a file where I want my Premiere Pro project file to be. So I'm going to go ahead and select folder. And then I do want to go ahead and import media. I've actually already navigated to it here, but I want to show you if you weren't already in the proper folder, you just need to come over here and locate your folder. So again, mine was on my desktop under class, tips and tricks, project, and then I had a media folder. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of my media. And we can click that first one, scroll all the way down to the bottom. we go. And then if you click Shift and select this last one, it's going to select all of our media there that is in that folder, which is exactly what I want to do. You can just go in and select one by one if you'd like, but I need everything in here. Well, I actually don't think we're going to be using everything in here today, but it's nice to have options. So I'm going to go ahead and press Create. All right, there we go. Oh, my workspace is looking a little wonky. Okay, well, that's good because we're actually going to start by talking about how you can optimize your workflow in Premiere Pro. So optimizing your workflow will help you edit faster and more efficiently. And this is something that I do find to honestly be really personal. And you will find ways to optimize your workflow the more that you work in Premiere and find what works for you and your editing purposes. But I do have just a couple of general tips that I have found that should be helpful no matter your project type. So let's go ahead and cover those. And the first tip that we're going to be covering is to find what workspace works for you. So the Premiere Pro interface is made up of panels that are organized into a layout and saved as a workspace. So when I click here, we can see this blue highlight around a panel. And then this is another panel over here, another panel here, another panel here. So Premiere has some factory default workspaces, but each workspace is customizable, as you can click and drag different panels to move them around or make them larger or smaller. So if I wanted to make my timeline larger, I can hover between the two panels and I get that little line with two arrows. And then if you click and drag, we're going to make that bigger. And that's actually about what I like it to look like. And then you can do that for pretty much any of these panels. And then we can also move panels around. So for example, if I wanted to move my tools here, if you click and hold near the top and then drag it, it will give you options. So I could maybe drag it to the bottom of my timeline. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, and we'd have to adjust this because now my timeline seems to have disappeared. So if I adjusted that down, and now we can still see our timeline and we have our tools down here. So I actually don't like that. So I'm going to pop it back into where it was and readjust it just like that. So if you do make edits to one of the default workspaces, you can save those changes so that they can easily be accessed later if you decide to change workspaces or accidentally move something around. So let's first look at those couple of options for default workspaces, and then I'll show you how to save changes that you make to your workspace so that you can easily access it from project to project. So we're going to navigate up here to our top menu bar and go to Window. And one of the first options here is Workspaces. So we have our pop-up menu that comes out and we see these 9 options for workspaces. So right now we're in the effects workspace, and I tend to work in either that one or the editing. So let me just go ahead and let's choose captions and graphics, and we'll see how that changes our workspace. Okay, so that pulled up, look, it pulled our tools up to here. It brought out this essential graphics panel, which I think actually may have already been there. It looks like that was about the only change there, was that it pulled that tools up here. Let's look at another one. Let's go into color. Okay. So here it has identified this panel to be the Lumetri Scopes panel. Right now, we don't have any media in here, so we're actually not seeing any of that Lumetri Scopes. But this is a workspace that they have designated is good for color editing, which is why it's brought up that Lumetri Scopes panel. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm going to pop back into Windows Workspaces and go to Editing. Okay, and let's go ahead and say, make this a little bit bigger, that I want to add a panel. So I like this workspace for the most part, but let's say I need something other than Essential Graphics and Lumetri Color. We can do that by going to Window. And then down below here, we can see all the options for panels that we can add into our workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and select, we'll say libraries. And I apologize, you guys, I have to cough real quickly. I'm going to mute myself. Okay, I apologize about that. So I'm going to click on libraries, and that is going to bring up a libraries panel, and it actually put it down here into this panel. And if I wanted to, we can click and drag and move that panel, we'll say over here, for example. So now I can have that panel, my libraries panel over here, right next to my Lumetri color and my essential graphics panel, if that's what I wanted to do. And if this is a workspace that you think is going to work for you and your editing purposes, and you've customized things, we've dragged our timeline over to the right length, we can then save those changes. Okay, and so the way that we are going to save those changes is coming up to Window on the top menu bar here. And then we're going to go down to Save as New Workspace, which is right here underneath Workspaces, and Save as a New Workspace. And then you can title it. So maybe you have different projects that you work on and you have different layouts that are going to work for you. I'm just going to go ahead and label this class and press OK. And now when we come up here to Window and Workspaces, we can see that we have the one that we have made for ourselves, class. So I actually don't like this for what we're going to be doing today. So I'm going to hop back into the editing panel. Oh, and that stayed there for us. Okay. Oh, I know why. So because we made those changes, what we need to do is actually reset this to the default. So after I have selected editing, we can then select reset to saved layout. And that's going to take us back to the regular editing workspace. Okay, before we move on, do we have any questions about workspaces, the ones that are available to you, or making any changes?
I do not see any questions yet.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the second tip to optimize your workflow is going to be to utilize keyboard shortcuts. So keyboard shortcuts are one of the easiest way to reduce the time that you spend in editing projects. I will admit this is a part of my personal editing workflow that I can definitely get a lot better at. So that is a goal I have as I continue in my editing journey. But Premiere does have an extensive set of keyboard shortcuts that are already programmed. These can also be changed to fit your needs or mirror keyboard shortcuts that you may know from another platform. So for example, if you use Final Cut or Avid Media Composer and those have shortcuts that you're used to, you can actually change Premiere's shortcuts and customize it to what fits for your needs. So let's first look at Premiere's keyboard shortcuts and talk about making those changes. So we're going to go ahead and up in our menu bar, navigate to the Edit button. And then we're going to select keyboard shortcuts, which we can see is all the way down here at the bottom. Something I did want to point out right next to, all of our options here, what it lists here is actually the keyboard shortcut for that tool or effect or whatever it is that it's next to. So we can actually see there is a keyboard shortcut for keyboard shortcuts. So I'm actually going to hop out of this menu real quickly and go ahead and utilize that keyboard shortcut to bring this up, just so you can see how quick that is. There we go. So I just pressed Control Alt K and it brought up our keyboard shortcuts here. So at the top right of the screen here, it has something called commands. And the commands drop down is basically where these keyboard shortcuts are going to work. So right now it's under the applications. And if you are on the applications command, these shortcuts are going to function regardless of what panel you are in. So you can be in your timeline, you can be in essential graphics, you can be in your project panel, wherever you're at, these keyboard shortcuts are going to work for you. But if you see, I had selected this and we have a drop down. So you can also go to certain panels. So for example, earlier I had a Lumetri color panel over here on the right. So if I click on Lumetri color panel, we'll see if there are any keyboard shortcuts that Premiere already has for it. And there are none. Everything's grayed out. Nothing is determined here. So let's hop back real quickly to application. I want to mention here, so we can see our keyboard here, obviously. And then if you go ahead and let's start with C, that's a pretty common one. Control C is for copy, or in this case, we can use the razor tool. So once I click on that, down here in the right-hand side, we can see what command is assigned to that key. So for example, to the key C, it is the razor tool. So if I pressed Control C, it would be copy. If I pressed Control Alt C, then it would add a new caption segment at playhead, and then so on and so forth. So these are the modifiers that you would have to press in conjunction with the key. And then if there is no modifier, then it would be one of these. And if you hover over each of these, oh, it's not popping up. Well, usually it'll pop up and tell you specifically, because if you see here, it has 2 currently assigned to the none modifier. So most likely this is going to work in the applications, and then this is probably assigned to another panel. And I'm not sure why it's not showing. Usually when you hover over, it'll have a little pop-out menu that will show you there. I did notice I have a Premiere Pro update available just a little bit before this class, so that might be why that's not showing up. There might be a bug fix. So I apologize. I just didn't think I was going to have time to download that update. So that might be why that's not popping up. But normally that little pop-up would show and it would tell you which panel that keyboard shortcut would work in. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice adding our own shortcut to the applications command. So we're going to stay here in applications. And right now we don't have any keyboard shortcuts for F2. So let's go ahead and assign a keyboard shortcut for F2. So there's a couple ways to do that. Over here, we have a little scroll bar, and this shows all of the possibilities for keyboard shortcuts. I am actually going to make it easy on us, and we're just going to search for what we're wanting to apply to F2. And we're going to say we want it to be the vertical type tool. There we go. So type that in, and then we can see it pops up right here. And then all we have to do is click and drag it to the none command. And so now F2 is going to be our vertical type tool shortcut. But let's go ahead and also add another shortcut to F2 that requires a modifier. So we're going to go ahead and this time search for rectangle. Okay, and we want the rectangle tool to be our shortcut when we do Control F2. So we're going to go ahead and click and drag. Oh, I see why it's not working. So for some reason, my button, even though it's showing here still key F2, it's not highlighted up here. So I just need to click on this again so that we get that blue highlight around that key, and then come back down here and click and drag. There we go. And now that'll work. So now we have F2 is going to be our vertical type tool, and Control F2 will be our rectangle tool. Let's go ahead and also add a shortcut to a panel. So we talked about the Lumetri color panel. So let's go ahead and choose that one since there's nothing in here already. And we're going to select the letter P. It should. So it will show you. And again, if it was working, normally when you hover over this, it will show you a pop-up that would say the pen tool. That's going to be that in the application. So that's going to apply no matter where you're at, regardless of your panel focus. But we're going to go ahead and add one that's specifically for when you're in the Lumetri color panel. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this search, and we're actually going to do the save preset modifier option. There we go. And so here panels, we're going to want to go specifically to the Lumetri color panel, and then Lumetri color panel menu and save preset. So that's the one I want to assign to this letter P. So I'm going to drag it up and over here. And now it's highlighted, and you can see it says save preset is going to be our shortcut for the keyboard P. And then that'll be when we're in the Lumetri color panel. And if you'll notice down here, it says the shortcut P is already in use by the application command, pen tool, and that will be overridden by this panel command when the panel has focus. And what that means basically is if you are in that Lumetri color panel, this keyboard shortcut is going to take priority. But if you're in any other panel, then the pen tool is going to be the one that pops up. So the only time this save preset is going to work as a keyboard shortcut for Lumetri color is when you are actually in that Lumetri color panel. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save our changes by pressing OK. All right, and now let's look at those keyboard shortcuts that we just created. So I'm going to go ahead and before we do that, I guess we should go ahead and drag some of our media in. So let's go ahead and we're just going to select the first bit of clips here and drag those all in. So we have plenty to work with. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the one that we did for our applications commands, which was F2 for our vertical type tool. So if you'll notice right now, oh, something else I wanted to point out. Oh, that's not working either. Well, normally, and that's a little frustrating. This was working just before the class, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's something to do with the Zoom screen sharing. But normally when you hover over these tools, it will tell you what the tool is, and then it will also tell you the keyboard shortcut for that tool. So for example, if I press C on my keyboard right now, you'll see it has the razor becomes blue, and now I have the razor tool selected. And then V is the keyboard shortcut for our selector here. So I wanted to point that out, but it's not working for some reason. So I apologize about that. But if you're following along right now, you should be able to hover over your tools and see the name of the tool and then its keyboard shortcut as well. But let's go ahead and press F2. Okay, I think I see what is happening actually. I think the Zoom controls might be, let's try this again. I'm thinking the Zoom controls are messing with my keyboard shortcuts because it keeps trying to mute me on Zoom whenever I press F2. I did not realize that. Give me just one moment. Okay, yeah. Unfortunately, you guys, I think the Zoom controls are possibly overriding the Premiere controls. I just did a run through right before this, and this was working for me. So I'm thinking that there's something going on with those platforms. But ideally, if you were to press F2 right now, it would bring up that vertical type tool. So it would automatically select this and bring up the vertical type tool where you could then come in, click anywhere on your project or your program panel here and begin to type. So that's a little disappointing. I'm sorry about that. Let's see if our control F2 works at least. Let's try that. Nope, it's still messing with the volume on my computer. That's interesting. Okay, well, in a perfect world, when you press Control F2, that would then bring up, what was it that we saved to Control F2? Oh, the rectangle tool. So I'm hoping if you're following along at home that that's working for you. Let's see if at least our Lumetri color panel one will work for us. If I can't show you guys any of the keyboard shortcuts, it's going to be a little disappointing. So we're going to actually, to get our Lumetri color here quickly, I'm going to go to hop to workspaces and actually go to effects. And that's going to bring up our effects panel over here. And one of our options there is Lumetri color. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. Okay, and then so the keyboard shortcut that we had assigned for Lumetri color was going to be save presets. So saving presets is when you, we first have to make sure we have our video track selected here. I'm just going to make some changes to the color. We're going to make it really blue and bring out some pink values. We'll bump the exposure down. And let's say this is a color editing scheme that's going to work for projects that I have or other clips that I have, and I want to save it as a preset to use on multiple clips. Ideally, if this keyboard shortcut works, I can just press P and it's going to bring up our save preset. So let's see if that works for us. Yay. Okay, it works. So I did just press P on my keyboard and you can see here it brought up that save preset keyboard shortcut. So I'm glad that one worked and I can show you guys that. So this is where I would then name it. So I'll just say butterfly. I can name it. I could put a description of what I want to use, these specific color editing options. I can press OK. And then once I do that, if I come up here, get that panel back down. The input LUT, I could go to browse. Oh. Oh, I lost it. Okay. Well, ideally that would be, I saved that preset, so I'd be able to find that preset a little bit later. It is just escaping me right now where I would actually locate that for some reason. So sorry about that, you guys. But that's been saved, so that actually works perfectly. All right. So before I move on, I'm going to talk about some of our top keyboard shortcuts, the ones that Premiere already has set, not ones that we have to custom do, and how those help you save time editing. Do we have any questions about the keyboard shortcuts that we've talked about so far?
No, I'm not seeing any questions so far.
All right. Thank you, Sabrina. Okay. So we're going to talk about some keyboard shortcuts that are going to help cut down on your edit time by reducing the number of clicks and moves that you have to make to elements in your timeline. It may seem like some of these shortcuts only save a few seconds, and honestly, that is true. But when you think about adding up all of those seconds when you're working on an hours long project or just even over your lifetime as you're editing, these shortcuts do come in handy and end up saving you time in your editing workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and what I'm going to do is make our timeline bigger so that y'all can see our timeline a little bit better here. Because one of the first things I'm going to talk about is something that really will affect our timeline, and it is called ripple delete. So ripple delete is a faster way to delete than the traditional deleting method of selecting your razor tool, making your cuts, and then deleting that track, and then you're left with a gap. So let's look at the traditional method, which would be you select your razor tool. Let's say we want to make a cut here and we want to make a cut here. And then we're going to go ahead and select that little bit in the middle that we no longer want. We would press delete. And then you're left with a gap here. And when you're left with a gap here, you have a couple of options. There's multiple elements on this track. So we could either select and move them all and pop them into place like that. Or you might move them individually like this. And both of those options take time and just extra clicks and steps that are not necessary. So what you could actually do after you have created your cuts is have the part that you're wanting to delete selected, and then we're going to press Shift Delete. And then that is going to go ahead and do what it calls a ripple delete, which is basically automatically closing that gap so that you don't have to go in and move all of these tracks individually. So let's just take a look at that one more time. So we've got our cut right here. I'm going to select that, Shift Delete, and then it automatically closes that gap. So we have a smooth transition between that cut right there. So that's one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts, honestly. Another really good one is something called Quick Copy. So this is an even faster way to copy an item that you want to create duplicates of on your timeline than Control C and then Control V to paste, whether it be a video clip, audio, graphic, text, or effect. Pretty much anything in your timeline you can quick copy. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and Alt, and let's see, we'll do it for this clip. Which before I do that, let me point out, if you'll notice here in my program panel, this video clip is not properly scaled. An easy way to scale that to the frame size is by right-clicking and coming down to scale to frame size. And that automatically makes it the size of our frame. Okay, so let's do a quick copy. So I'm going to go ahead and select whatever element it is that I'm wanting to copy, which in this case is our Beach 3 clip. And with that selected, you just go ahead and hold down Alt and then click on the clip and drag it up. And we can see we have now created a copy of that Beach 3 clip. And those are not linked in any way. Oops. Those are not linked in any way. So I can go ahead and move this around however I like, move it over here, whatever you'd like. That quick copy, in my opinion, it really comes in handy when you're working with like text and stuff. You can easily copy, a text format and then apply it to a different video clip, change your words, and you're set to go. So that's a really quick way to copy things. Let's talk about tracking forward and backwards. So let's see. The way I laid this down, we ended up with a gap here. I'm actually going to close that. Let's do this. This makes more sense. Okay, so we have a gap between these clips here, and we want to go ahead and close that gap We can actually still ripple delete. Hopping back to ripple delete real quick, but if you click in between and highlight that section, right click ripple delete, that will automatically close that gap. But another option would be to select the track, select forward or backward. So if we click on A, that is going to select our track tool here. And you see our little arrows here. And then whatever point I choose, it's going to move all of the clips from that point forward or backwards. So if I do that, or if I come over here, it's going to move just those over, or we can go here and it'll move all those over. But if you'll notice, when I do that, it's moving everything on both of these tracks. Let me go ahead and add in one more audio track so I can show you guys something. So I'm just pulling in our boardwalk music track to the A2 track down here. And so if I scroll in a little bit, do this, it's going to move all of those tracks together, and that ends up moving my music, and I don't want to do that. So how do we stop that from happening, but we can still move multiple tracks at the same time? What you could do if you didn't want a certain track to move while you are tracking multiple other tracks forward or backward is you can lock that track layer. So I'm going to come to the left here, and on our A2 track, which is where our music is, there's this little lock looking icon. I'm gonna go ahead and click on that. It's gonna turn blue and it's gonna lock that track. So now when I use this track forward and backward, it is only going to move the tracks that are not locked, and that music track stays in place. So that's really handy, especially when you're using like music for an entirety of a project and you need to move multiple tracks at the same time. That comes in really handy. Any questions? I think I have a couple more shortcuts to cover, but any questions so far?
Not yet.
Okay, awesome. And I apologize, you guys. My throat has just started to act up, and I am having a coughing fit over here. So I'm doing my best. I apologize. All right. So next we're going to go ahead and talk about spanning markers. So markers are a really useful editing tool that allow you to make comments and label your footage right on your timeline. So this is a really nice way to label video clips. For instance, if you have a long interview with someone and you need to watch through and find all of the places that they talk about a certain subject, you can mark every time that that subject is brought up, and then you can easily go back and select needed portions for your final product. You can also leave notes to yourself about what you want to do with that part of a clip, such as apply a certain effect or add text. And this is a great tool, not only for your individual products or projects, but when you're collaborating with others as well. So let's go ahead and look at that real quick. So to create a marker, the keyboard shortcut for that is the key M. But an important thing to note is that you're going to want to make sure that you don't have any of your clips here selected. So let's go back to this one, to our butterfly clip. And let's say we have decided we want to make a comment about the last half of this butterfly clip. So the marker is going to lay down wherever your playhead is. But if you have an element in your track selected and you press M, which is what I just did, you'll see that that marker lays down on that clip and it's not up here. And that's not what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that real quick. So the way that you would get the marker up here, and let me show you what that looks like, is you would just unselect that clip, but keep your playhead in place, press M, and then you can see that marker is added up here. And so if we wanted to span that marker out and make it last maybe to the end of this butterfly clip, we can just press Alt and then click on that marker and drag it out. And now if you right click on that marker, you can go to edit marker and we can put a name. So maybe I need to make a color edit. So I'll do that. And then you can put a description in there as well. So I can say use preset, for example, and press OK. And now you can see it says it in the marker. You can also hover over and it will show you color edit, use preset. And then that way, when you scroll out on your timeline, you could easily go through and you would be able to see all of your markers up here and where you have indicated that you need to go back or, made comments to yourself about footage clips or audio clips. Okay, so I think we're actually going to go ahead and hop into creating an opening title screen. So first, I'm actually going to take everything off of our tracks. It's looking a little crazy. That was locked, so that did not delete. Okay, then we're going to start over with a nice clean slate here. I'm going to open up effect controls and we're going to delete that marker. So to delete markers, if you'll notice it stayed on our timeline. If you want to delete it, you can just right click and then go clear markers. And that would clear markers on all of your timeline if you had multiple markers. Okay, so an opening title screen is an element that you can add to your videos that will really easily take it to that next level. And Premiere has some really great options that are extremely easy to utilize to get an awesome looking title sequence. So we are going to cover what is available in Premiere today, but I did want to mention that there are plenty of websites out there as well that have title template downloads that you can add to Premiere and use as well. Just make sure that you're obviously taking the time to vet the websites that you download from. But Adobe Stock is a great and trustworthy platform directly from Adobe themselves. You do have to pay a monthly fee to access their content, unfortunately. But let's talk about, before we look at some of the templates that are available for free here in Premiere, let's talk about creating your own title screen. So we're going to go ahead and make sure we are in, okay, yeah, that works, our effects workspace, and we were, so that's perfect. I'm going to go ahead and drag just one clip in. We'll drag our butterfly clip in. So we want to create an opening title sequence. So we've got our butterfly clip here starting at about the, let's see, oh, that's way too long. Let's see, it's starting here around the 15-second mark. So that's okay for now. We can always adjust that later. What we're going to go ahead and do is select the type tool. And for that, we're going to go ahead and use the keyboard shortcut of T. Okay, and you can see that selects our type tool over here. And then we're just going to click anywhere. I'm going to make this a little bigger up here for you guys. We're going to click anywhere on our program panel up here. And that's going to go ahead and select or insert a text box for us. For this title that we're going to animate, it's going to be a pretty simple one. You've probably seen something pretty similar to it on multiple productions. So I'm just going to go ahead and type a capital I. And then over here, I'm going to navigate to the Essential Graphics panel and scroll down a little bit. And we can see here where it says 100 underneath text, that is the font size. And I want to make this I bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the slider and drag it up. Nope. Let's make sure that I've got it selected. And I don't. All right, there we go. Now it should work for us. Okay. So we'll drag it up, and that looks pretty good to me. So that 227 is what we're going to go ahead and keep it at. And what we're going to do before we make any more changes is we are going to go ahead and center our anchor point. So I hope you guys can see this on Zoom. I feel like it might be a little hard to see. Let me see if I can make this any bigger. But there is like a little circle down here at the bottom left of this eye, and that's called the anchor point. And you usually want your anchor point to be in the middle of your text. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and click Control and then grab that anchor point and pop it right into the middle. And we can see our guidelines right there that tell us that that's in the middle. We've got that little T, and now our anchor point is in the middle. So if I press Control again, we can see that's going to do it to the bottom of our text box. That's to the top. This is anchored right in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that. And what that does is if you want to rotate your text at all, it's going to rotate around that anchor point. So for example, if I was to move that anchor point over here and then rotate, that eye is going to rotate around that anchor point. So that's not what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and just Control Z it back into place there. And we're going to go ahead and add another text layer. So I'm going to press the T on my keyboard again and add some more text. This time I'm just going to go ahead and type Library Productions. Okay. And instead of coming down here to change our font size, you can also just go ahead and move your box. So when you hover over the corner, you get those little arrows and you can scroll in and out to make it larger and smaller. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it about there. I want it to be a little tinier than this big eye here, because this eye is actually just going to function kind of as a line for us. It's not going to be the letter I. And you'll see what I mean here in just a second. So with this library productions text, I want to go ahead and center it both vertically and horizontally. So over here in the effects control panel, we're going to click this top one, this top little icon underneath align and transform, and that is going to center your text horizontally. And then this one below it is going to center it vertically. So now Library Productions is right there in the center of our screen, and we're going to go ahead and take the eye. So just click on that to select it. And we're going to go ahead and move it on over to the side like that. That looks pretty good. That actually looks pretty centered. But another way you can center those two things together is if you select the eye, press Control, select Library Productions. Oh, I'm sorry, press Shift, and then select those two things. So you have both of your text layers selected. You can come back over here to this align and transform. And this option right here is going to align their middles. So let's see how close I was. Okay, so it moved Library Productions down just a little bit. So I was pretty close with my estimate. And now since they're both selected, you can move both of those together and then go ahead and center them that way. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. But you can also just go back in and move them individually as well. So this alone is not a very fancy opening screen. It could work, but let's talk about animating this opening screen because it's something you can easily do. It seems like it would be really complicated, but it's actually pretty easy and it will get you a really professional looking end product. So to animate, we're going to come over here to our effects control panel, which is on the left-hand side. And what we're going to do, I'm going to move this over so you guys can see what's going on over here a little bit better too. We don't really need our timeline right now, so I'm just going to move that down so we can really see our program panel and our effect controls panel. So here, we're going to go ahead and if you'll notice up top, we have our two text layers. We're going to start with the text layer for I, which we can see here. So I'm going to go ahead and click this little arrow next to it to drop down some of our options. And here we can change pretty much everything we could change over here. We can change our font type, we can change our style, so bold, regular, italics. We can change how it is aligned to the text box, but we're not going to mess with any of that. We're actually going to scroll down a little bit because we want to come right here. There is this box that says uniform scale underneath the transform option, and we're actually going to go ahead and uncheck that. And then what we're going to do, making sure that we're at the beginning of our clip, which we are, this right here is the length of our clip. We're going to go ahead and lay down a keyframe. So a keyframe is basically a mark point for effects or adjustments. And I think that'll make more sense in just a second. So to set down a keyframe, we're going to press this. It looks kind of like a stopwatch right next to this horizontal option. So we're actually going to do it on the vertical scale option. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And it's kind of hard to see because it's at the very beginning, but right here you can see there's a little diamond that got laid down. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to press Shift and the right arrow twice, and that's going to move us over 5 frames at a time. So since I just did it twice, it moved us over 10 frames. If I do it again, that's another 5, so 15 frames. And to lay down another keyframe, we're going to click right here, this little circle. And that will lay down another keyframe, which I think you guys can probably see a little better now. So we have that diamond, that's keyframe, and that's our first keyframe. So we have our 2 keyframes. And what we're going to do, this little button to the left of that circle is going to hop you between keyframes. So I can press that. It's going to take me to the first keyframe. And then I can press it on the right. It's going to take me to that next keyframe. But we first want to hop back to our first keyframe. So let's go to the very first one by clicking that left arrow button. And for our vertical scale, we are going to select that and choose 0. So I'm going to press 0 and press enter. And now you can see on our program panel over here that it disappeared. And it's because our vertical scale, so up and down scale for that element has been set to 0. Let's hop back to this. We want to make sure that's 100 because this is the point that we want it to appear again. And let's go back to the beginning, and we're going to go ahead and press play so we can see how that vertical scale changes from the 0 to 100, and it gives us an animated effect. All right, there we go. So pretty cool. What we're going to do now is put some animation onto this library productions part. Ooh, and we are running short on time. Okay, so I'm going to talk real quickly. Yeah, we're going to animate this library productions part. So we're going to go ahead and over here, I'm going to minimize our text I options and expand our text library productions option. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is create a mask. So we're going to go down to, oh, actually it's right here underneath the text. So we're going to create a mask over library productions, which if you work in Photoshop, you'll know all about masks. It's kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's going to create a mask over our text. So let me show you what I mean when I say that. So I'm going to select a rectangle, and then it's going to showcase anything that is within that rectangle, and anything that falls outside of it is going to be masked. What I'm going to do is hover over the edge of an anchor point here and hold Shift on my keyboard. And that's going to give us the option to make that mask bigger or smaller. So we're just going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see all of the word for library productions. And now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and drop a position keyframe. So we want to scroll down over here. And again, under our transform options, we're going to go ahead and click on that little stopwatch for laying down a position keyframe. And now, so we have our first keyframe. We're going to go ahead and press Shift and the right key. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll say 20 frames over. And we're going to lay down another keyframe, just like that. And then what we're going to do right here, our position. So this first number is going to be horizontal values. And that's what we're actually going to want to do because we want our text. So if I click and then move left or right, we can see it move like that. So I'm going to move it until we can't see that text anymore. And then we're going to hop back. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. It's making it hard to select those options. There we go. So I'm going to go back to my last keyframe. So when this keyframe starts, our library productions text is going to be visible. And then when the keyframe ends, it's not going to be visible and it's going to look like it has fallen into that eye, basically. So let's go ahead and hop back to the very beginning of our clip and we'll see what that all looks like together. There we go. And since we're running so low on time, I am not going to talk about how we can make that fade seamlessly out. I think we are honestly just running out of time. So I apologize, guys. I know I had a lot for us today, but we do only have 10 minutes left. So let's real quickly talk about creating rolling credits because this is honestly something that is so simple. And I know when I think of a movie, you know, at the theater and think about the rolling credits at the end, it seems like it must just be something so complicated, but it's really not. So we are going to go ahead and create a new text layer. So I'm going to go to the end of our clip here and press the T tool to create a new text layer and just click anywhere on here. And we're going to go ahead and start typing our credits basically. So we're going to do just a very basic rolling credit. So we're going to type directed by, and then we'll say name. And before I continue any further, I want to make sure that my text is centered to the text box. So I went ahead and over here in this panel under text, selected that middle option, and that made so that everything is centered. So directed by, and then we'll do produced by, and I'm showing you guys how to make this a template, which is why I'm just putting name instead of putting in actual names, because we can save this as a template that we can then import into multiple projects and then just come back in here and change the names. So we'll talk about that once we're done. I'm going to go ahead and move it up just so I can see what I'm still writing here. So produced by, and then we'll say starring, enter name, enter name, enter name, enter And if I make this a little bit bigger, I'm actually going to scale this down. Oh, nope, we'll go back to fit. I'm going to select so we can see, all right, starring, name. Okay. So we've got some credits here. Not very lengthy, but you can always just continue adding, rolling up, and you can see all of your options there. So what we're going to do now, we talked about this align and transform option earlier, and we want our text box to be in the middle. So we're going to go ahead and align it vertically and then align it horizontally. And now what we're going to do, let me make this a little bit bigger because we're going to need to see something over here. Okay, so right now in this panel, you can see it's kind of gray over our text layer. It's because it's selected. Before we actually do the animated part of these rolling credits, we actually need to unselect that text layer. So I'm going to click right below it to unselect it. And you can see our box went away. It's no longer selected. And this is where we get the option here to roll, which you can see is down here underneath responsive design. So I'm going to go ahead and click that box next to roll. And once I do that, it gives us some options like starting off screen or ending off screen, which we currently have selected because I would like my credits to start off screen and then also end off screen. There's also some options for pre-roll and post-roll, and this basically inserts like just a blank video clip, so just black footage before and after your roll, and then also ease in and ease out. So let's take a look before we mess with any of these, what this looks like, just the roll starting off screen and ending off screen. So I'm going to go ahead and come back to our timeline and press play. And we can see it is rolling just like that. And it went pretty fast. If you look down here on our timeline, it's quite small. If we drag that out, so hover over the end of the clip, click and drag, that's going to change the speed. So now it's much slower because it's going to take all of this time to show those credits. So that's how you can kind of adjust your speed. But let's go ahead and take a look at what it does if we choose, I'm going to shorten it again because it's pretty fast. And if we choose ease in, I'm going to click over here and make it, we'll do a 5-second ease in. Press enter and let's press play. And you should see the credits easing in slowly and then it speeds up. And it was just a 5-second ease in. So that might be, let me play that one more time for you guys. You should see it's going to ease in very slowly and then speed up. Okay, so that's a super simple way to get rolling credits. Do we have any questions in the chat?
I'm not seeing any questions. Remember that you can type them in the chat, or you can use the Q&A button at the bottom if you have any questions for us right here at the end.
Okay, awesome. Yes, we only have 6 minutes left. I still wanted to talk about degrading video. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I had 2 different ways that you can degrade video that we were going to talk about. I'm only going to talk about one way. It's the way that I personally would use. And the funny thing is, it's actually pretty hard to find video clips, like stock video clips that are grainy, because most stock video clips are pretty good quality. So we're going to be working with the best I could find, which is this sand clip here. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this sand clip over into, oh, I'm sorry, not the sand clip. I apologize. It's actually this beach 4 clip. So I'm going to drag that beach 4 clip over. I'm going to right click on it to scale it to the frame size because we can see it is not the frame size and now it is. And I'm going to make this smaller. And I don't know if you guys can see, it looks slightly grainy here. It was clearly shot on an overcast day. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. Ooh, that was too much. Let's go to 50. So you see, it's not quite super clear here. I necessarily wouldn't call this grain, but grain and noise does really impact your video quality. If you don't know what grain or noise is, it's basically like the little dots that you can see in videos that were shot in usually difficult conditions, like poor lighting conditions. Sometimes you might want to add grain or noise as an effect to your videos, depending on what like your aesthetic is. But for the most part, when you're starting off, you want the clearest video quality to begin with. So fortunately, Premiere does have some options that can help with that. But I will mention the best results you're going to get with degraining a noisy video is going to be through a paid plugin. Two of the most popular ones I know of are from Neat Video and Red Giant. Because the tools that or the results that we get with utilizing the tools within Premiere are just not going to be anywhere near as refined as the results that you can get with a paid plugin. So what we're going to do here today in Premiere is not going to be perfect, but if you're not looking to pay for a plugin, you aren't completely out of luck. So let's talk about what's called the median effect tool. And the median effect tool works by, it will basically look at the individual pixel. So, a video or a photo is made up of tons and tons of pixels. So it will look at one individual pixel and then all of the pixels that surround it, and it will find the median color of those pixels. And then it will change those pixel colors to that median color, which ends up giving you sort of a blurred effect, which can help to reduce noise. The trade-off here is that since it's creating a blurred effect and kind of reducing that graininess, it creates a blur almost. So if you're applying it to the entirety of your video clip and your entire video clip is not grainy, it's going to make the rest of your footage look blurry, which you may not want. So I'm going to show you guys real quickly how to apply it to the entire frame, and then how to apply it to just one specific section using a mask. We're probably going to run just a couple of minutes over 4 o'clock, and I apologize about that. Wanted to give you guys a heads up. If you need to leave, feel free to do so. This is going to be up on YouTube at a later time. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to take this back to fit so we can see the entirety of our clip. And in our effects panel over here, right here. So up here, we got effects. I'm going to go ahead and use the search bar to search for median effect. Sorry, median right here. And we can see it's here under actually an obsolete video effect. So I'm curious if they're going to be getting rid of this soon. But this is an effect that we can click and drag onto our clip in our timeline to apply it. So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag and drop it onto our beach clip. You can see that changes our color up here to red. That's because an effect is applied. So over here in effect controls, we can now see that median effect. Right now, it hasn't done anything, and that's because we haven't changed our radius. That is what we are going to need to change to put that effect to the whole frame. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to hop over here. And if you hover over 0, you get those arrows. If you click and hold either to the left or the right, actually, we're going to need to go to the right because we need to pop up. That's going to increase. If you look over here in our program panel, you can see it getting really blurry. So let me go back down to 0 for you guys. That's what it normally was. And then popping up, it's really blurring things out. So if you had a grainy video, this would help to smooth out that grain basically, but you lose a lot of detail. Go ahead and reset it to its normal. So yeah, we lost a lot of that detail in there. So let's say we just want to apply it. I'm going to zoom back in a little bit to this small portion of the clip. Maybe we just want to get rid of some grain right here. We can do that by applying a mask. So we're going to go ahead and I'm actually going to use the pen tool here. So underneath our effect in the effect controls, so underneath the median effect, I'm going to select the pen tool, and then I'm going to go ahead and draw a mask. So, you have the elliptical mask. We used the rectangular mask earlier, but we're going to go ahead and draw one because this is kind of a unique shape. So I'm just going to lay down anchor points and draw around this rock here. Oh, I'm not going to be too specific about it. And I actually want to go a little further out of the rocks. I want to make sure that you guys can really see this effect when it's applied to just one little bit. And there we go. I accidentally moved it. Let's do that. All right, that works for me. Okay, so we've got our mask created here now. And so now we're just going to apply that median blurring effect to just this area. So what we're going to go ahead and do, let me scroll down here a little bit. We need to go ahead and bump up the radius again. So I'm going to make it extremely exaggerated. So I'm really going to blur it out here. Just so that you guys can see the effect. Obviously, in your own clips, I would not suggest, blurring it this much unless you really needed to. And if maybe it was like in shadows, it probably wouldn't be that noticeable. If you had really grainy shadows, this blurring wouldn't be noticeable. But this is actually a fairly bright video, so it's pretty noticeable. Let me go ahead and zoom back out a little bit so we can see. Click off. Okay, so we can see right there. That has really cut down on the detail and blurred everything out. So if there was grain there, that blur would help with that grain. But let me go ahead and zoom back in. So I want to show you guys. All right. So right now, if you look at it, well, since I didn't lay down, if I would have laid down a rectangle, you probably would have seen the edges a little bit better. But we actually don't want to see the edges when we're applying effects like this because it becomes very clear that something's going on with this area of the video. So the way that we can help that is with what's called feathering. So I'm going to go ahead and select my mask again, select it just like that. I'm going to put down, it actually had some feathering already applied. I'm going to put it down to 0 so you guys can kind of see, hopefully. So yeah, it's a little hard to see there. I'm real quickly just going to lay down a big rectangular mask so you guys can really see what I'm talking about with the edges. Okay. Let's do it right over here. Okay. Yeah. So I think right there. So now you can really, I think, clearly see those edges, to the mask. So right here, we can see those edges pretty clear. You wouldn't want that. So what we're going to do is feather, which is basically just going to blur that effect out so that there isn't such a harsh line. So let me go ahead and select that mask again and then choose mask feather. And I'm going to really feather it out. We'll put it up to 75. I think usually 50 to 100 is pretty good to use. So let me move that up a little bit more. We'll put it to 80. And let's take a look at what that did. And hopefully we shouldn't see. Yeah. So now you can still kind of see, you can definitely tell something's going on here, but it isn't. Let me go back to what it was before. So blurred out. And then you can see those edges clearly again. Let me reapply that. So blurred, you can see it really helps over here kind of remove those edges. And if I remove it, you can clearly see that square. So those are some ways to degrain video. And I highly suggest if you guys have really noisy or grainy video to go ahead and try out these options. Again, I really had a hard time finding stock video that is grainy. So we just didn't have the best to work with today. But that is how you would degrade video. Okay, so I apologize, guys. We ran a little over time. Did we have any questions before we end? I'm going to go ahead and pull my PowerPoint back up.
I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay, awesome. So, well, thank you, everyone. We do really appreciate you being here today. I really wish I would have gotten through all of my content. I do apologize about that. If there was anything that you needed a little more help with, or if you wanted to go over any of this a little more in depth, I would highly suggest that you go ahead and you can submit a book a librarian request. I am actually not a librarian, but in your request, you can mention me and we can basically schedule 30-minute one-on-one time at one of the library's DCSs, and we can go in depth about any of the things we talked about today or any other questions you might have about Premiere. So we do want to remind you that you have access to LinkedIn Learning with your library card, which has a really good selection of tutorials, not only for Premiere Pro, but for the entire Adobe suite. And honestly, just about any topic that you can think of. I think that has been dropped into the chat. Thank you, Sabrina. And then be sure that you stay up to date with the Plano Public Library by following our Facebook page and checking out our blog at planolibrarylearns.org. There you can find recordings of our past programs and other materials about how to take advantage of everything that the library has to offer. I do highly encourage you to please complete our program survey, which should either be sent to you or pop up as soon as you exit out of Zoom. We really value your feedback. And if there is something specific in Premiere or any of the Adobe Creative Suite that you are looking to learn, please let us know about it. And we would love to develop that content for you guys. I'm hoping this is a class that we can do maybe in person sometime over the next year. I think this would be a really good one to do in person, and we'd have a little more time to be flexible with, but we only had the hour for today. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you guys next time.